But I would submit to you that Nehemiah presents to us a classic case study in someone who stepped out of the crowd, who didn't just go along. He had a very good position. He was well compensated. He was well protected. Of all of the slaves in a foreign country, he is the taste tester. He's the first line of security for the king. He eats well. He lives well. He has the friendship of a supreme monarch. He has a good spot. And he puts everything at risk. He steps out of the crowd. He puts everything on the table, pushes the chips into the middle of the table. It's a lesson in leadership, and I just want to give you the introduction to it in this session. Nehemiah chapter 1 and verse 4, he hears a report from Jerusalem, someone who's traveled through the capital where he lives, and he's gotten a report from a Jewish brother about what's happening in Jerusalem. He said, when I heard these things, I sat down and wept. And for some days I mourned and I fasted and I prayed before the God of heaven. Not because his life isn't good. Not because his circumstances aren't good. He is weeping and fasting and seeking God because of the condition of his people. You see, we have been coached into a completely different kind of a responsive faith. If our life is good and our circumstances are covered, we're golden. It's not our problem. We're blessed. Too bad about the rest of them. But Nehemiah understands differently. He spent his life as a slave, well fed, but a slave. And when he hears about the condition of his people, he begins to weep and to seek God. Listen to his prayer, verse 5. I said, Lord, the God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of love and with those who love him and keep his commandments, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer your servant is praying before you day and night for your servants, the people of Israel. This next sentence is shocking to me. He said, I confess the sins we Israelites, including myself and my father's family, have committed against you. I find we're far more adept at confessing the sins of those we don't like. Lord, forgive us. The people who lead us are wicked. Or if you like the ones that are leading us, Lord, help us. Don't let the wicked people get control. We remove ourselves from the equation as if our failing schools or our $33 trillion of debt or our obsession with climate and our refusal to protect our unborn children has nothing to do with the condition of our hearts. It's somebody else. And Nehemiah steps out of that crowd. And I'm inviting you to do that. And he said, God, I confess my sin and the sins of my father's family. We have acted very wickedly towards you. We have not obeyed the commands, decrees, and laws you gave your servant Moses. Nehemiah very clearly acknowledges his role and the role of his family in bringing God's judgment upon the people. I wonder if we have the courage to do that. It would have been easy to harbor resentment and to blame others. He could have been mad at the Babylonians or mad at the Persians. After all, they're pagan cultures. They worship demons. Their moral code was vastly different. Their respect for human life was different. There were many reasons he could have looked around him and said, God, these people amongst whom I am living. But he didn't do that. Our current trend is to focus on the failures of others and other generations, while we virtue signal our exceptional choices. I'm tired of it. Stop complaining about people who lived 200 years ago and live a godly life today and watch what God will do. But the story doesn't end there. Nehemiah gets permission from the king to leave his job and to leave his place in the palace and to make a very dangerous journey to go back to Jerusalem and to rebuild the walls around the city, to provide defenses for the people in Jerusalem. And so off he goes on this journey. He steps out of the crowd. He takes on an assignment nobody wants. It's not a need that was unknown. It's very widely known and widely reported, but when Nehemiah hears the need, he says, wait a minute, I can do something about that. I have access to authority. I have resources that could be entrusted to me. That's something I could address. His peer group doesn't. He's not the only one that could have addressed it. He's willing to climb out of the crowd and stand there alone with his name on the marquee and say he's the one responsible. Now, as I understand it, that's what Jesus was talking about. He said, listen, if you'll acknowledge me, I'll acknowledge you. That you've got to leave some things behind. And we just haven't been too enthusiastic about this. We've wanted to take everything with us, right up to the very last moment when we step out of time into eternity, and then we're trusting God's got something even better for us there. That is not the biblical invitation we're given. Nehemiah said, I'll go. I'm up for this. Let's move. Chapter 2, I said to them, you see the trouble we're in Jerusalem. It lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Let's rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. We'll no longer be in disgrace. And I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me. And the king had said, and they replied, let us start rebuilding. Nehemiah mobilizes other people to do the right thing because of his courage and his boldness. Others joined him in the cause. He stepped out of the crowd, and there were some other people willing to follow a leader who would do that. How long are we going to wait for somebody else to lead? How long are we going to wait for the White House to do the right thing before we start doing it in our house? How long are we going to be mad at the houses of Congress while in our houses there's all sorts of ungodliness going on? Nehemiah said, I'm going to go do something. He couldn't do it by himself. But he puts out the invitation and people begin to rally to him. They replied, let us start rebuilding. So they began this good work. But then Sanballat, I'm not going to pronounce, somebody, and Tobiah, he was an official. And Geshem, they heard about it. And they chose not to join. They chose not to say, that's a great idea, Nehemiah. We've been wondering when we could do that. Thank you for paving the way. Their decision was to mock and to ridicule us. What is it you're doing? Are you rebelling against the king? They not only mocked us and ridiculed us, they tried to make this political. They're going to try to use authority beyond anything they control themselves to shut us down. Chapter 4. Sanballat, he's still there. He said, when they heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and he was greatly incensed and he ridiculed the Jews in the presence of his associates and the army of the region. What are these feeble Jews doing? Please note, not everyone agreed with Nehemiah's perspective and his chosen course of action. There was very vocal opposition, powerful opposition. You see, we've wanted to be bold for Jesus as long as everybody that heard us said, when someone raises their hand and says, that's offensive, and then they start trotting out the labels. You've heard them, you're something, sexist, misogynistic, racist, something. They're going to label you with something because they think if they attach some hateful label to you, we'll be quiet. You're intolerant. You're judgmental. You're so judgy. Just so judgy. No, actually, I live my life under authority. And when there's been opposition, we thought, well, that couldn't be God. I thought for a minute God wanted me to say something, but when I said something, they didn't organize a parade. I stood up, and they took my chair. Nehemiah, at this point, he's all in. And there is hatred being expressed towards him, threats being directed at him. He's having to endure and overcome mocking and ridicule and threats. I'll give you one more piece. Chapter 4, we continued the work. It's not some just theoretical threat. There is a physical threat to their well-being. They have to divide the labor force into half to do the work and half to stand guard. Listen to the description. We continued the work with half the men holding spears from the first light of dawn until the stars came out. Do you think they were negotiating for a 32-hour work week? And at that time, I also said to the people, have every man and his helper stay inside Jerusalem at night so that they can serve as guards by night and as workers by day. They just got signed a 24-hour shift. And neither I nor my brothers, nor my men, nor the guards with me even took off our clothes. Each had his weapons, even when we went for water. And if you ask for a summary of that, it seems to me that hard work and sacrifice were required to complete the assignment. Who knew? I thought if I stepped out of the crowd and said, Lord, I'll stand for you, that the angels would obliterate any opposition. Well, that doesn't seem to be the message that we're handed in Scripture. God helps Nehemiah. There's provision made. There are all sorts of blessings that come his way, but there is a tremendous amount of effort and sacrifice necessary to complete the assignment. Nehemiah did not explore a lesson in theoretical theology. He didn't just have a Bible study about how Jerusalem used to be. He didn't get his friends together and let's discuss the way God moved amongst the people during the Exodus. He said, we have been wicked and our children have suffered because of it. Perhaps we could change. I believe that's the message for our generation. We're not waiting for an election and someone else to step out of the crowd. For too long, we've wanted someone else to sacrifice for our benefit because we're entitled. We know we are. And I believe God is putting something on the table before the church right now in our nation. Are you willing to step out of the crowd and honor me with your life? I don't know what the answer will be. I can't tell just yet. But I'll do everything in my power to encourage, advocate for, stand with those who are doing their best to acknowledge the authority of Scripture and the uniqueness of Jesus. It's an important time, church.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel. You know the drill. Hit the bell for notifications. If you want to, leave a comment.